Okay, so now that we have Visual Studio Code and Python installed, let's do a practice program. Woody Allen said that 90% of life is showing up. So if Woody Allen was your teacher, what grade would he give you? To start off, we're going to open Visual Studio Code and open Visual Studio Code. And we're going to ask the user if they showed up and if they did the work, because if 90% of life is showing up, then 10% of life is doing the work in Woody Allen's scenario. All right, so here's our test.py from earlier. If you get this restricted mode bar right here, click Manage, and then Trust. Right, and close this. Okay, and now let's go to File, New Text File, and Control S and save this as woody.py to the desktop. Click Save. Okay, and in Woody Allen's quote, he says that 90% of life is showing up. So let's create a variable. And when we create variables, we want to create mnemonic variables. So mnemonic variable is a variable that makes sense for its purpose. So if somebody else were to edit this code, or if you were to go back after a long day of editing lots of different programs and you wanted a reminder as to what the variable was for, a mnemonic variable would show you what the variable was for. A very non-mnemonic variable would be variable 1. We would have no idea what variable 1 means. It could mean many different things, and if you were working on many different programs throughout the day, this could be very confusing. So we'll delete that, and instead, let's make this variable v underscore for variable, showing up weight. Right, and we're going to assign this variable to the value of 0.9, which 0.9 is a float, but it can also be a string if we don't tell the program that it's a float later. So we'll keep that in mind. And now we'll make another line with the variable doing the work. Right, so doing the work weight is 0.1 because 10% of life is doing the work if 90% of life is showing up. Right. Let's make a little space in between here and now create another variable, which we're going to start with str underscore, which will stand for string in this mnemonic nomenclature. So showing up score. Assign that to the value of input. So input is going to be what the user types in, right? But first we're going to ask the user a question. 90% of life is showing up. Did you show up to class today? Type 1 for yes, and we're going to word wrap this so that we can see the whole program. Or type 0 for no. Colon space. Make sure there's enough space for the user to enter their answer. And this question and answer situation will happen in the terminal. Next, let's make another variable called str underscore doing the work score. So we're making strings so that we can accept the user's response in the terminal. Assign this variable to the value of input. We're going to ask the user a question before they can answer. So if 90% of life is showing up, 10% of life is doing the work. Did you submit your work yesterday night? Type 1 for yes, or type 0 for no. All right, so now the user is going to type either 1 for yes or 0 for no. We put a colon and a space so that there's enough room for the user to answer so that they don't feel that their answer is squished right next to the question in the terminal. Let's make a little more space here. And so now we have the user's score, whether it's 1, they showed up, or no, 0, they did not show up, or 1, they did the work, or 0, they didn't do the work. But now we want to convert these answers the user is typing using the keyboard into the terminal, which is inputting to Python as string. We want that to be integer instead, because with integers we can do math. We can also do math with floats. We cannot do math with strings. Strings are alphanumeric input, so letters or numbers, but a combination maybe, or one or the other, but not in number, not in integer or float form. So an integer is a whole number, right? And float is what we have similar to the weights, where it's 0.9, 0.1, any non-whole number, right, can be a float. And that's a float because it would be shown on the graph if we were to make a graph. So let's convert the user's input into integers. Let's make another variable called the total showing up score and turn it into an integer. And to do that, we just type int and then parentheses, and inside the parentheses we put our variable. And when you start typing it, you see the variable pop up. You could just click on it. Right? And now in the same way, we want to make another called the total doing the work score. And in the same way, we're going to turn that input into an integer as well. When we start typing, we can see it and click on it. Great. Let's make a little bit of space, and underneath line 7, we need to turn this into a weighted score, because it's not 100% of life is showing up, it's 90% of life. So we have to apply this to the weight variable we created at the very beginning. So weighted showing up score is going to be our next variable. We'll assign that to the value of the total showing up score, which popped up right here, so we'll click on it. Multiply that by the float, which is the very first variable. So making sure it's in float form by putting float here so that it's not going to be in integer, or rather not going to be in string form. And v showing up weight. So showing up weight is here, so we click on it. Great. And in the same way, underneath what is now line 10, we'll do the same thing, only for doing the work. So the weighted doing the work score is what we're going to call this variable. And we'll take the total doing the work score and multiply it by the float that we have earlier doing the work weight. Last but not least, we're going to create one final variable called final Woody score and assign that to a float value of the weighted showing up score added to the weighted doing the work score. And now we print if Woody Allen was your teacher, he'd give you a comma space, put final Woody score here, out of 1. And let's see how this runs. Control S if you haven't saved yet, and now click Run. 90% of life is showing up. Did you show up to class today? Type 1 for yes, or type 0 for no. Right? So I'm going to type a 1 and then enter. 10% of life is doing the work. Did you submit your work yesterday night? Type 1 for yes, or type 0 for no. I'll say I did not do the work. All right. If Woody Allen was your teacher, he'd give you a 0.9 out of 1. Right? So in your homework, due this coming Tuesday night, you will be writing a program to compute someone's weighted grade. So in Brightspace, you will see 3 different variables, one for the homework weight, one for the exam weight, and one for the discussion weight, and they're all assigned to values. Write a program starting with those 3 lines, and ask the user for their homework grade, exam grade, and discussion grade, and then the program will have to print out their total grade in the class. So you'll need 3 input statements. You'll use grades 4 for A, 3 for B, 2 for C, and 1 for D. Don't forget order of operation. So PEMDAS is please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. That's parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and then subtraction. And you'll display the answer through a print statement, just like here. When you're finished, go to File on your homework and click Save As. And go to the desktop and save your homework as homework1.txt, right? And click Save. And I know it's not a Python file, but by doing this, you'll be able to upload it to Brightspace. Okay? So upload that to Brightspace, and I'll either see you in class next week, or if you're in the online section, I'll see you in the next video.